got to tell y'all about this thing called life. You know I got to share it. See, there's this thing called life. I got to tell y'all.
Hey, what's good, everybody? Hope you guys are all well. I'm going to make this episode 173 of the podcast. Once again, I have a few interviews coming up this month, so stay tuned for those. This next one that's coming up, it should be really interesting. I'm really looking forward to it, right, with a previous guest. Um, what I wanted to talk about was I wasn't sure if I should post this on my music channel or if I should post it here. But this story, for some reason, came up, right? And I think there's a few past things that have been coming up. And I'm kind of curious about why this came up for me, right? But, my nephew had sent me a story about this old Tupac song, Brenda's Got a Baby, right? Maybe you're familiar with it. If not, it's a really deep song. The story was told about how they actually found, I guess it was about Tupac reading an article and seeing about, there was this baby that was thrown in the trash, and then someone found the baby, and so, that was the story, right? And I guess they ended up finding the kid, and then they connected him with who the story was about. I don't know if her real name was Brenda or that was just the name used, right? But it all started from Tupac reading this article, and so I had written a song similar, right? I had a story that it seemed the universe placed in my path, and the same, right? I was like, wow, I think I just met this person to write this story. And it was before I was in this embodiment, I was really aware. And I remember, and I love that, like those before, right? Before you connect to everything and then everything's kind of revealed, it's beautiful to be getting those cookie crumbs along the way and seeing how everything connects, right? Because and the way it kind of started was, I was dating someone with a birthday, right? And it was funny because my brother, we our birthdays were 3 days apart, right? And his ex-wife had that same birthday, and then the at that point the relationship, that I don't know, it was just a interesting relationship. She had that same birthday, and then when we broke up, that's when I had the MySpace, and I had like 45,000 people on there, and somehow I don't know, there was someone I connected with, and we agreed to meet up, and then come to find out she had that birthday too. So there was those synchronicities already, and I was like, what? Should I run the other way already or what? Because she had that same birthday too. But I ended up meeting up with her, and then she told me her story, and it was really interesting, right? Because in the I don't know if in the story of Brenda's Got a Baby, it was like someone that she was abused and had a baby, right? I think by 12. Well, in my song, it kind of starts like that, right? So it's a little heavy. So if you don't want to listen to this, by all means, right? It's a heavy subject. But it was important to tell those stories back then, right? I don't know if I hear a lot of these kind of stories anymore with hip hop, right? Before we went in deep about these things, right? I had a few songs like that. Even in this song, I started off. Uh, I had already wrote a song called Lorraine, you know, that was like a deep song too, telling a story. So I was really good at the storytelling, right? Like that, right? Like the same way Tupac, he read an article and it inspired him to write this story. The same in the song. There's three stories, right? I think two of them I had read about, and then the last one, it was a story that I was told in person. And this girl, similar to the Brenda's Got a Baby. Oh yeah, because that's what happened when I met her. I remember I went to her house. She invited me to her house, and then there was a kid there, right? And he looked already big, right? I think he was already like probably in high school or something. And I was like, what? Like, and she's like, yeah, that's my son. I was like, how? Like, he's huge, and you're young, so I think I was in probably my I want to say late 20s, and she was probably in her mid 20s when I met her. And her son was already big. And then she explained how she had him at, I believe, 11 years old, right? And I was like, what? Like, and then she explained the story how, I guess, you know, I might have said it a little different in the song, but from how I remember, I believe the dad passed away, and then the mom kicked her out on the streets at 10 years old, right? And then she ended up finding work like at a restaurant, cleaning, like washing dishes or something, probably in the back. And one day while walking to wherever she was staying, I don't know where she was, if she was staying on the streets or what, that someone ended up coming from behind and hitting her on the head and then abusing her, and then she gave birth at 11. And I think it was even a relative, so it was a very similar kind of story to like the Brenda's Got a Baby, right? But in the case of this girl, she actually ended up keeping her son. And I was just like, I remember at that point too, in this existence, right? Because in those times, obviously, I know it makes sense now, but back then it was important to feel like, or even as a man, right? Like to feel like, oh, I can't be complaining about nothing, or like the older generation was stronger than us, so we have to, kind of toughen up, right? And I like how it's become of like the work harder. I mean, work smarter, not harder in a way, but at the same time, like there's obviously downsides to that, right? There's a lot of downsides to that, but then there's good sides to knowing like, hey, like I think it happened on purpose for like a balance, right? That for them not to be taking advantage of us, right? Even though they still are, right? Like companies like Amazon or like me, I worked for UPS where they bragged about how much profit they made while cutting our giving us less time to do a little more work, like all the little sneaky stuff they would do, right? Giving us less stuff, even as far as like not giving us the turkey on Thanksgiving, taking away little things slowly while bragging about, oh, we made more money and more money, right? So I think things happen for a reason in that way. But in that time, I know I'm babbling on about that, but in that time, I think after meeting her, it pushed me to, at that, it was a crucial moment in my life where it kind of pushed me. I met her not only to tell her story, but even in my walk to be like, you know what, I can't, like how this, and I think she had become a teacher by like 18. She explained that she was going to some night school while she was in high school or something like that. And I was like, what? So in the song, I mean, I wrote it, so that must be the story, but I don't remember the details, right? She explained it to me. It's not like even, going back to the older generations, like even my mom, right, where she grew up, I think the school there only went up to junior high. So she told me how her oldest sister, even when she graduated from junior high, she became a teacher. So imagine what, like a teenager already teaching the younger kids, right? So I think once they graduated like junior high, they could put in to be a teacher for like, I don't know, the elementary kids, right? So my oldest aunt, she just graduating from junior high, she became a teacher, right? I don't know if there was another aunt that did the same thing too, right there in like the town where they grew up, right? So in this case, this girl or young lady, um, she ended up even that right after everything she went through, right? Having a baby by age 11, being on the streets, and then keeping her son, and then somehow still going to school, and then even yeah, by the time she was 18, putting in that time for night school and then or something, whatever she was doing, to already have something to be able to teach. And so I put that story into the song, right? And so I don't know why all that song came up, and I hadn't heard that song in so long, right? I'll put a link to it. It's called Delirious, right? Like yeah. So anyways, it came up, right? For me, I think that's been one of the most important things in my life, right? The songs, right? Telling the stories. I think in general, we have to tell the stories, right? And in this, when they're told through songs, obviously they last longer, especially in today's age. But even what came up about a card I had done in one of the live readings, a card came up, and it was for one of the the goddesses, right? And how she was erased from history, but there's no images of her, right? All the images of her were erased, but the story was still there, right? What was her name? Marlene. I don't know. I have you could see her like in one of the live readings I did, right? But they say like she was the sister of the sun god, the god of war, Huitzilopochtli, and she was erased, right? If it wasn't for the stories, who knows? Maybe she was written. I mean, obviously not. Maybe she was written into the history, right? Into the stories, but her image was erased, right? So that's kind of, I think that's why this message is coming through. How important the story is. We have to tell these stories, right? And I always wanted to tell stories, and that's why I write. That's why I write things before the story gets forgotten, right? That's why I release the songs, right? I push myself to release things because if I don't, then they'll never get released, right? And then the stories just die. And these stories have lessons too. Like for me, it was just about that. Like, hey, who am I to complain or burn out when, how did this, girl do this, right? Back then, right? Like things like that. So I don't know why I wanted to share that story, right? Maybe it was just all triggered by that, right? Maybe it was just triggered by all that. But even that came up, right? Even something interesting came up. Let me read about this since I talked about it in the last video. So in episode 172, I talked about how I had a vision of like this goddess who we know as the gods of the ancestors, how she, it looked like in the vision, it looked like her coming off a spaceship and all this, but it goes perfect with the Mayan earth goddess, right? Ichel, right? Ichel. Um, Let me read it to you. The Mayan earth goddess Ichel, who is also associated with the moon, fertility, weaving, and medicine. She can be depicted as a young or old woman, and she has a destructive side related to storms and floods, as well as a regenerative one. Another important figure connected to the earth is the quadri- quadripartite god Itzana, who can be represented as the earth crocodile. Oh my God, that's funny because I was saying how in that one too, how the crocodile appeared in the sky and then it started coming up, and the four bacabs who support the sky and earth and the corners of the world. So Ichel, the goddess of the earth, moon, and fertility, she is strongly linked to the earth and water, and also the cycles of the moon. Um, there was something about the planting too. The earth linked to fertility. It was like crops and all that stuff. But anyways, yeah. But anyways, when I first had looked it up, it was um it was about that, right? Like the planting and all that. So I was like, that's crazy because that's how I seen the vision of the male gods, right? They were planning and all that stuff, right? They were putting things into the ground. And even that, it was funny because when I had gone to the psychic fair that I mentioned in the last episode too, um, I went and Linda, who I've interviewed, she had a post there, right? She had like for her jewelry and her artwork, and she mentioned Pam Gregory, who I used to watch, and she hadn't popped up in my feed in a long time, right? Pam Gregory, who's an astrologer, right? Um, So I clicked one of her videos popped up like yesterday, I think, and I clicked on it, and she was talking about with the astrology, and she was talking about planting, and all this thing, but with the stars. So somehow I think I think it's both, right? I think I saw an old vision, but also maybe this is a cycle, right? That right now we're in that time again. Maybe they were showing me how when when that happened before, but right now she mentioned it a few times. A few I don't know how long into the her video about what's happening right now with astrology. She was mentioning the planting and the growing, and I was like, wow, so that's kind of the vision I saw. So I think right now is that, right? There's something new being birthed, right? So it was just funny that I was shown in a vision like that. So I know it always makes sense after, right? And I think they just wanted to give me that confirmation. Once I saw, I ended up looking up Ichel, which then talked about all that, right? Like she's the earth goddess. So I was like, okay, let me look up which, if you know I didn't know if to put Aztec or Mayan, but I happened to put Mayan. And then when she came up, um, when she came up, that's what I was reading, right, about the land and planting and all this and that. That's funny that they have her as the origins of witchcraft. That's pretty interesting. Hmm. I'll have to read about that. The Lady of the Rainbow. It's crazy because that's even my. Yeah, well, I'll talk about that later, right? But I don't know. Okay, so I think that's it. I think that was it. Mostly, I just wanted maybe it would have been a better story to share on the. Well, you know what? Let me say this. Like as far as that's a very synchronistic. Like I said, like there was someone who I knew that had that birthday. Then my brother's ex-wife had that birthday. Then this girl that told me her story had that birthday. Then my first yoga instructor, when I started going to yoga, um, for all of you that know already now know, like I got my certification as a yoga instructor, but the first studio I went to, even she had that birthday. So this is a recurring number, for me. So I don't know why that number happens to be recurring. Just obviously it means something, right? Just like there's other numbers, right? Obviously that like the book I wrote and this and that that recur, right? Like little cookie crumbs that were left. Um, but that was before I really understood what was happening, right? I think I was just being nudged. But maybe that's something I'm supposed to share about. Obviously don't ignore the signs you get, right? So you could follow, because eventually, right? It's like pulling the little thread, and eventually once the whole thread comes undone, you begin to see clearer, right? All this stuff. But I remember that because that was back in the days when that was when I was starting to realize the synchronicities more, and they were just so out there that even that being I wrote a lot of songs where I was put in the right place, right? And I loved hearing that story about how Tupac, he happened to look at the newspaper, right? Well, which he read every day anyways, but that's how his stories would come. And the same, right? Like, I've written stories where like that, right? I heard a story and then I don't know, boom, a song came out. Like that's how fast it would come out, right? Somehow I hear a story that it reminded me like when you hear about the old troubadours or whatever that rolled around with their guitar just singing these songs, and that's how the stories got passed on, right? Um, yeah. So at this point, I feel like I'm rambling now, so I'll end it there. Um, I hope this story makes sense because I just felt like I had to share it. I wasn't sure why. Maybe it would have been better, like I said, on my music channel, since it is related to that, right? But I'll put a link to the song too, if anyone wants to hear it. But I remember at the time it was just an inspirational. Well, let me say this last thing then, because I think I was thinking about this, like that person, right? Like super strong, right? To be able to go through all that. And the fact that she chose, now I could say that. See, back then I wouldn't have said, I hadn't been shown the birth planning. I hadn't heard ND stories talking about the pre birth planning. I mean, the pre birth planning. being shown, like choosing the journey, right? I hadn't been shown all that when I met this girl. But now to imagine that she chose that, right? That all that being giving birth at 11, being on her own on the streets, like, bless those people that choose these things, right? Because probably at that point in my life, right, I had already faced a lot of like life and death situations, all that stuff that causes a lot of trauma and a lot of I know, but even that, right? So it's like we're given what we can handle. And to me, hearing that, I was like, oh man, like how did this person make it? Like, right? Like, and so it made me kick myself, right? So I know I was meant to hear that story at that time. And now, like, wow, the fact that, if she chose that adventure to inspire others, she sure did, right? So that's how, right? Like she, like that was insane to me that journey, so everybody has their own story, right? And you're gonna inspire others, and so to all the artists out there, for sure, share those paintings, those stories, those poems, those things that you're meant to share. Um, because I feel like it is part of your agreement to share for the collective and not to die with them, right? Not to leave this earth. Oh yeah, and I remember hearing something about that, like all the stuff that goes to the grave, right? I think it was Les Brown. Is it him, the motivational speaker that talked about that, right? Like the grave. I forgot what he said about the grave, right? How many things are buried in the like the that the grave has the richest, because all the stories that were untold, the poems, the songs that weren't written, everything, right? So, um, I think that's always been like how do you say it? Um, man, my mind's been drawing blanks lately, but one of those things that you don't like. I forgot what it's called when you don't like something, right? A pet peeve, right? One of my pet peeves is like, and I've been told, hey, well, not everybody writes things that fast or this and that, and but sometimes I guess like it does irk me when people like overthink things, right? Like just let it out. Let your because I guess once you can see it that you're gonna help someone else with your song or your poem or your story, and then once you start seeing that, then maybe it'll change your perspective where how much of your ego is in that to for it to want to be so perfect when nothing in this place is perfect, right? That's why just everything, right? I mean, however you want to see it, right? Right now, what popped in my head like cars, right? There's always recalls and this and that, and maybe that's not the best example, right? Because with cars, obviously, it's like they release these cars and then people are unsafe because, but it just shows you, right? Like the way things, they come out, and then sometimes, hey, it is what it is, right? But that probably wasn't the best example. But yeah, your art, right? It's different. It's you see how many horror. Oh yeah, I read. So maybe I was meant to read that about how like someone even sold. In case you guys don't know, someone has sold an invisible sculpture. I forgot which one sold for millions, right? It was either like a painting or a sculpture. I think one sold for thousands, and then one for actually it ended up selling for millions or something, right? Like or well, over a million, right? Like an invisible sculpture and an invisible painting. And I was like, wow, like talk about uh like whether it's ballsy or what it to be able to sell an invisible painting or sculpture blew my mind, right? And the person that bought it too, like bless these two crazy people, right? Like the seller and the buyer for doing that. But it shows you if someone's willing to sell an invisible painting and a sculpture, then why are you hoarding your gifts, right? All that stuff. So on that note, I'll end it there. Thank you for listening to my rambling, and hopefully this connects with somebody. All right, peace.
Life may move fast, or it may move slow. I met a silly man who said he'd make it slow. We look up out towards space, or even at the sky. One that gets away, but never look inside. Breathe in, breathe out. Life is a maze, but we'll figure this out. I mean, human beings, I ain't got no doubt. Yo, we say-
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, sometimes you just feeling it, you know what I'm saying? You just feeling it. And I wanna feel this way forever.